Welcome to the Ken Hill Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. And before we kind of dive into this one, just a little general housekeeping. Yeah, it's been a little while since I've released a podcast, and behind the scenes, there's been a ton of stuff going on. We've obviously had all this, all this crazy pandemic stuff, and I've been doing a lot of online training. Oh my gosh, a lot of online training, and the Racer 360 platform is just absolutely amazing, and that has been a game changer for some people. I've also been basically shoulder deep in working on my Motopilot guides, which is going to be a great guide for both students and instructors. With all the things that we do, all these podcasts, right? All these things that we do with all these objectives are going to be in a great written form for everybody to follow, and it's going to be a really neat program. And I've been knee deep in getting all these things done. So that's a little bit of the update. We also just finished our first track days of the year up at the Ridge with Track Time. After again behind the scenes dealing with so many new policies and procedures, but we got ours together. And we had two pretty darn successful days up at the Ridge. And this podcast comes from not only what I saw a little bit at those days, but also at a couple of previous days I saw when we did cars. So my car instruction is getting pretty filled up, doing car instruction as well. And I saw a lot of things that paralleled with that. And then as I wrote myself notes at the end of the day, just some my takeaways, I started looking into my podcast notes and realized, wow, we actually have a lot there. Hence, this podcast is these days, those days that I saw, right? The 2 days of the cars and the 2 days at the motorcycle days. Overall, extremely successful. Very few issues, but the issues I saw were so easily avoidable. And that's what I said to myself, is that they made it easy to crash. They made it easy to spin. It was so easy. It was just, they laid it out there. They handed it to the track to be able to do that. So that's what this podcast is about. Let's make it hard to crash. And there are so many things that we can do to put ourselves ahead of the game. And I had somebody write to me not that long ago that said, I've got somebody telling me that the only way that I'm going to get faster is I need to crash, right? So I need to find out what the limit is. And it's complete bullshit. I mean, you fall down, blowing past the limit, and you really don't know what happened that got you there. So let's make it hard to crash. So how are we going to do that? Let's talk about that. So it really starts before the event, and it starts before the event of, okay, why am I signing up for this event, and what are my goals for this event? In this case, what we really saw, and it wasn't just this event, but it was other events around the country as things open up. People are essentially losing their mind. And yeah, I know you're pent up and you've got all this other stuff going on. But yeah, let's think about, what are my goals? What am I trying to accomplish as I get back out here? And in the case at the Ridge, I mean, my first few laps at the Ridge were on 190 horsepower GSX-R 1000. And so going up the front straightaway at over 170 miles an hour, if your sense of speed isn't up, right? If you're not having your technique engaged, things get pretty rushed. So what are my goals? What am I trying to accomplish during these days? And then let's look at conditions. And when I say conditions, people typically will think, well, yeah, let's see what the weather looks like. There's so much more to conditions. Yes, we have the weather, but what condition is your bike in, right? What have you updated your bike? Have you not updated your bike? What's going on with it? And what can you expect from the changes or not changes? And let's linger there for a second, because with the riders that I worked with during these days, and it's the same thing that we've done with Motor America weekends, is typically the first session, we have our bike set up slightly softer, because If you go out on a chilly, say, May day in this case, and your bike is set up, or even your car is set up with settings from your last September day when you ran a personal best, you may have a different set of needs with your suspension. So we'll start off a little bit softer to bring some confidence in, make sure we're using travel to get those things doing. So part of these conditions is your bike, right? How are we doing with that? Other conditions are you. There were there were a lot of tight-fitting leathers and there was a lot of tight-fitting driving suits the last few days. So let's think about what condition you're in and whether you're able to do the things that you need to do, and of course post event what we have to do to get going with that. And then the environment itself, right? Which is it a track day? Is it a race day? There's different things that go on with each one of these days, and you've got to be able to take those conditions into play. So conditions, there's a lot to the conditions, right? The weather, your bike, you, and then your environment. And one other thing here that we'll find out that kind of goes with what I found is I had a really great conversation with a very, very fast rider during the event, and he had a new set of leathers. And last year he had a crash and got new leathers, and his leathers were he needs more of a custom suit, and his leathers didn't fit. And he found himself in a situation where he couldn't ride to his ability because he had ill-fitting leathers. So let's take a look at that, right? Your gear has to fit. You're asking your gear to do something very, very important. And whether it's your riding gloves, your driving gloves, your helmet, whatever it may be, your leathers, let's make sure our gear fits. Let's get updated on that and make sure everything's good there. And then when we get ready to ride, or when we start our ride, let's think about starting slow to end fast. Now, let's dive deep into this. When I say let's start slow to end fast, I mean let's start slow in your brain. Meaning I saw people going at a slow pace, but falling down, or at a slow pace and spinning the car. What we found was that they weren't slow in their brains, right? They weren't engaged, so their technique was not engaged. And a perfect example of this is on the bike side, is we saw a lot of people going slow, but then with an underloaded front tire crashing on the outlap multiple times. So their brain wasn't on their front tire. Their brain wasn't on, hey, I'm going slow, right? My suspension settings were probably a lot stiffer than they needed to be for the conditions. And the tire wasn't compressed, no contact patch, going extremely slow and underloaded front tire low side. So realize that, in the moment, I need to compress my tire. I need to get some contact patch going. We want to be slow in our brain so we can activate these techniques. And that's really what we're talking about. And as we get up to speed in our brain, then of course, our pace is going to come up too. What this really is about is let's double down on our technique and the report cards that the technique offers you. And for instance, I made a reference to it earlier, which is sense of speed. Going to the ridge, jumping on a GSX-R 1000 and, boom, up the straightaway. What do you think I did on my first laps, right? I way overslowed turn one, way overslowed because the bike is so fast. Things are coming at me. So double down on technique, which is, hey, guess what? I'm not seeing my end of braking in turn one early enough. And I'm not using the proper amount of initial braking to carry me into my end of braking. So I spent the next couple laps doing that. And I was actually very pleasantly surprised to see by the end of the first session on, a little bit even cooler conditions that I was getting to my normal brake marker with a lot of comfort because I engaged my technique and I allowed my brain the time to be able to make that happen. And then I could start to use the report cards that I have available to me, end of braking, apexes, exit direction, weight on the inside arm, etc., to make sure that I was getting where I needed to go safely. So starting slow to end fast doesn't necessarily mean that you're going slow. It's going slow in your brain so you can be proactive. It's being able to be in a position to make a decision out of all the things that you've got available, all these tools that you've got available to you. So yeah, I think this is just really, really a big one, is that we saw a lot of late, abrupt inputs, not at a slow speed. So those are things that are going to get us into trouble. So another thing, let's get data, right? Let's get data. We need to spend a little bit more time on our post riding and driving evaluations, right? How do we do? We need to have some briefings for this. So let's spend some time collecting video. Let's spend some time with simple GPS based data acquisition, right? You can get an AIM solo box and get it. And yeah, if you want to set up a online conference with me, we can absolutely go through these things. But we need to be able to collect data so we have a plan for your next session. So you're just not out constantly doing the same thing over and over again and wondering why you're not improving, or maybe you're adding risk to a situation. So let's get data so we can have a post-event briefing to see what your next steps are. Another thing, passing, right? Let's make it, part of making it hard to crash is the passing. Not only for you doing the passing, putting yourself in an awkward position, but for the person that you're passing, right? A lot of times, if you can put that person in an awkward position, but you might piss them off, or you might put them offline or whatever it may be. So let's realize, let's go back to, what are your goals? What are the conditions? What kind of day are you at? And let's really think about that and what your return on your investment is right there. So passing, I saw a lot of crazy things with passing, where a person would not control their speed on the entry. They'd run wide. They'd be out at the exit apex with lean angle, try to go to the throttle and out of the seat, for instance, right? And that's just not going to get better. So let's make sure with passing, let's think about how we want to do that and make successful passes for both you and the rider that you're passing. So that's part of making it hard to crash. And the last one that we're going to talk about here is being accountable to somebody else. Let's recognize about being accountable to somebody else, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your pit mate, whether it's your trainer. Be accountable to somebody else. And that is a big deal, right? Because right, if you're not recognized, you're not held accountable. And let's take some of these things and there's nothing wrong with debriefing with your pit mate. Hey, how'd your session go? Yeah, not bad. Boy, I just feel really rushed out there. Or wow, my exits are really good, because I'm getting things done early or whatever it may be. But let's get these things verbalized, whether you're talking to somebody or writing yourself notes. Be accountable, right? Be accountable to someone else, or even being accountable to yourself. Being out there and just running around. How'd it go? Yeah, I don't know. I think okay. Well, we have all these techniques and we have all these report cards that tell you how you should be doing and whether things are going well or whether they're not going well. So make it hard to crash. Make it hard to crash. Do these things to be proactive so you have successful days. And again, let's go through this. Let's go through this again, right? Before the event, let's look at your goals. Let's look at all these different conditions, the weather, your bike, and you, and your environment, and your gear. Let's be in a position to make proactive decisions. Because when we have to make reactive decisions, boy, the list gets pretty narrow at that point. So the more that we work on our proactive decisions, right, then the more we make those muscle memory, and the easier they are to be reactive with. Let's double down on your technique. Let's get some data, right? Let's get some data. Let's collect data so we have something after these events to be able to go back and see how you're doing. And then let's be accountable. Let's be accountable to somebody else, which ultimately we need you to be accountable for yourself for these things. So, all right, make it hard to crash. Let's get out there and enjoy ourselves. But let's make the job of crashing a lot harder. Copyright 2019 Ken Hill Coaching, all rights reserved.